on demand if you would like to. So welcome to our Graduate Mentor webinar. Today we have our guest speaker, Tanya McCalmon, and she's going to be talking about influencing without authority. This is our 11th webinar that we've held, presented by Graduate Mentor. So we've got about an hour. We're going to hear from Tanya shortly after a very short introduction from me. And there will be the opportunity to post any questions at the end, and we'll go through those for you. So a quick introduction. If you don't know who I am, my name's Dan Hawes. I created Graduate Mentor over 2 years ago, just when the pandemic was biting. The idea being to provide a free one-to-one mentoring platform with a mission to help the next generation of university students and graduates reach their career potential with expert support from inspiring mentors. I'm also the co-founder of GRB, which is a recruitment consultancy for university students, recent graduates, alumni, and recruiters. We have 75 staff. We've worked with over 2,000 clients, such as Amazon, IBM, Unilever, and Ocado, and we've managed to place over 8,000 graduates into full-time graduate and executive level jobs. Now, quick background to Graduate Mentor. So at the moment, we have a community of over 3,000 university students and graduates across a broad range of degree subjects and also a broad range of universities. And I've just put this pie chart up here just to give you an idea of the community and their background. So we try and target students and graduates from marginalized groups. So we know from research which universities have a high number of diverse students within their population, or students from underrepresented or disadvantaged groups. So we identify certain universities and drive them to the platform and benefit from having one-to-one mentoring sessions. Now, we've reached various milestones over the 2 and a bit years we've been in existence. We have over 3,000 students who've registered and successfully had a mentoring session. Now, we have a choice of over 300 mentors. These are from a range of organisations as big as Facebook, Google, Coca-Cola, the Army, and the University of Nottingham. And they've all kindly volunteered to give you a mentoring session online using Teams or Zoom to talk about CVs, interviews, assessment centres, or just brainstorm ideas. We've had various workshops such as this. This is our 11th workshop today. We're also very active on social media, over 2,000 followers, and we have a number of success stories. Students and graduates who've gone through the programme and have found jobs with organisations, or have aced an interview, or they've had brilliant feedback from their CV. Go on the platform and have a look at some of this wonderful success stories so far. It's entirely free, and the reason is because we have a number of partners who provide some financial funding. So we have 1 gold, 1 silver, and 2 bronze partners that are giving us some funding to cover our costs and enable us to sustain Graduate Mentor for future generations. So I'd just quickly like to thank our partners. So obviously GRB, we've provided a lot of funding for Graduate Mentor, but we also have 3 other wonderful partners: SureServe Group, Softwire, and Oakwood. Right. Our speaker came highly recommended from one of our most active mentors on the platform. And I'd like to introduce Tanya McCalmon. She has over 10 years of experience working in a culturally diverse contexts in the UK and internationally. She supported and contributed to the personal and professional development of individuals and diverse teams around the world, and has helped business leaders identify opportunities for improvement in the areas of learning and leadership development. So it is brilliant that we have her here to present. You're going to learn lots of new things, and you're going to have the opportunity to ask questions at the end. Okay, Tanya, over to you if you want to share your slideshow.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to, there we go. Can everybody see the screen? the
Yeah,
slides?
that's perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dan, for that introduction. And it's a real pleasure to be here today, joining you for this webinar. And I'd just like to say thank you as well to Zia, as you say, Dan, for making the introduction and for enabling me to be here today to share this with your mentors. Now, today's session is very much about looking at the fact that you don't need to be a leader in order to be a leader. Okay. Now, when you graduate, if you've already graduated and you're thinking about what steps you're going to take next in your career, you'll be thinking about making applications, doing interviews, and entering a new role in organizations of all sizes. So they could be small to medium enterprises, large organizations, but whatever that you decide to do and whichever size organization you decide to go into, leadership skills are a key skill for the 21st century. And influencing, being able to have influence within the organization, is going to put you in really good stead for career success. So today I'm going to just talk to you, it's a very much a whistle stop. We could talk about each of these topics for an entire afternoon and longer, I'm sure. So this is just a whistle stop to give you some ideas and get you really thinking about how you can build credibility and trust among your peers. So thinking about how you can work with your colleagues, leveraging the power of storytelling to help you gain influence as well. Looking at how you might start to develop intercultural competence. And again, this is a huge topic, so we're just going to be going over this quite briefly today. Building sponsorship and allyship. You're very familiar with mentoring, as you're all members of the graduate mentor community. And then finally, we'll be looking at why resilience is an important factor. And this all culminates in how you can have influence without having that authority. Okay, so thinking then, I'd like you to just have a think about a time when you've been in a conversation with somebody and you've recognized that they seem to be listening to you in a way that they're looking for a pause in your conversation so that they can jump in and add their advice, give you their suggestions, make their point. I'm sure we've all been there, but I just want you to think about how that made you feel just for a moment there. Just reflect on that. And have you ever been working with somebody, whether that's on a university project or in a work context, where you've had to collaborate with another person or a group of people, and somebody in that group may have been resistant or reluctant to share some of their knowledge and some of their skills? And just thinking then, how successful was that project? Okay. And finally, can you remember a time when you told somebody that you would do something for them? Or sorry, when somebody told you that they would do something for you and they didn't follow through, or they did follow through, but the standard of quality wasn't quite what you'd expected? How likely are you to ask that person to help you again? Okay, so this is all about how we're building trust with people. Essentially, it's about doing three things. There are more things that you can do, but three things I want to talk to you about today. So the first thing is to listen. And when I say listen, I mean really listen actively. Show people that you care about them, that you're really hearing them, and you want to know what's important to them. So it's about listening so that you can find ways to be helpful. But I also want you to be mindful, and we'll come on to this when we speak about resilience and well-being. I want you to be mindful of not overcommitting. So yes, listen to be helpful and find ways that you can help, but be mindful of overcommitting, and think about what your own workload is as well, because you don't want to be overcommitting and missing deadlines. Okay, or even resulting in you lowering your standards in order to meet a deadline because you've got too much going on. The second thing then is to share. Share generously your skills and knowledge. People always appreciate this. Okay, so think about the skills and the knowledge that you have. Now, that may not have come from work experience yet, but you've certainly got lots of skills that you will have picked up from university, from college, from your studies, possibly even part-time summer work or internships that you may have done. And these transferable skills can be brought to the table and used to offer something to the team that you're now working with. And people always value sharing of knowledge. and skills. Now, you might be thinking, well, what skills can I bring to the table? Well, these, as I said, if you don't have much work experience, that might be true in the case of technical skills, but soft skills here are the key. So you might be really good at motivating people, or you might be good at getting a team to work together. You might be somebody who's really good at researching, and you're able to quickly find resources that are useful to others or helping the project move forward. So all of these things are what you can bring, what you can offer, what you can share. So it's really about thinking, what is your superpower? What is it that makes you unique? And how can you use what differentiates you to add value to the team? People are going to really see you as a credible resource within the team for those things. And then the final thing that I want you to think about is, how can you be accountable? So remember, if you've had that experience where somebody said they'd do something but then they didn't follow through, and how it made you feel, and would you go back to that person? It's unlikely. And this is the same in the workplace. We make decisions about people very, very quickly, and we want to know ultimately, can we trust people and can we respect them? So it's really important, if you're working with a team or an individual, or even if you're an individual contributor, that if you say that you're going to do something, you stick to that and you follow through. So you're keeping promises, sticking to deadlines, and ensuring that the quality that you deliver is of a high standard. And that's going to really put you in a position of standing out from the crowd, being somebody that people can rely on. Okay, so 3 tips there for you. And another thing that comes into credibility, it kind of leads on from that, is because that's all about building relationships. So when you are building relationships, one thing that you can do is to tell stories. Now, the power of storytelling, I'm sure, as you will understand, is huge, particularly in a business context, surprisingly. Now, I remember my favourite teacher in primary school, and I'll never forget him. He was extremely firm, but in a way that all of us in the class admired and respected. He used to bring materials to life to us by telling stories and sharing anecdotes. And that, for us, it really helped us to engage with the materials, no matter what subject it was. Every single subject was a subject that we were happy to engage with, happy to give a go. And to be honest, I've never since that class experienced somebody who had the ability to bring people on board through storytelling and have a whole class full of 9-year-olds without complaint getting on with it and just giving it a good go. So, he really took us on that journey of discovery by weaving in those stories. And that got buy-in from us. As young as we were then, we didn't know what was happening, but it was really, really effective. And maybe that's why I decided, in part, to go into teaching. These things really do have an influence. And you can use this in your work experience as well, because, as I said, storytelling is something that is really, really powerful for when you want people to come on board with you. If you're leading a project, if you're working with others on a project and you have an idea that you want people to get on board with, really useful. Now, you've probably already used storytelling. It's all about structuring your ideas and telling it in a way that convinces people that something is a good idea, or that you're the right person to lead on this. A good example is an interview. So I'm sure you'll be familiar with the STAR method. So you're starting with the situation, then looking at the task. What did you have to do? What was the action? What did you do? And what was the outcome? What was the result? So that's a really good structure for interview storytelling. But like I said, if you are thinking about how you want to bring people on board, if you're leading change, for example, which is a common thing in business, then this is a really good structure that you can use. So you start by painting the picture, telling people what the current reality is. So where are we right now? What's happening in the present? And then we want to present a call to action to the team or key stakeholders and really highlight what needs to be done differently. Now, that's not always enough to get people on board, so we need to continue. We need to create a vision. So we need to talk about, what are the possibilities? What could come from this? How could we make things better? What would that look like? So it's really about using those words and using that story to create a picture that people can really get involved in. And then you need to introduce the steps that help people to get there. So this is about creating a very clear roadmap through storytelling. So what's the first step that people need to take, and the next, and the next? There's no work that they need to do. It's all being done by you. It's all happening through storytelling. And then at the very end, you bring everything together and you're able to highlight a new reality. So this is what that better future looks like. And you've done that through storytelling. Now we can all remember, times when we've been told stories, and we feel, actually research has shown that the person who's listening to the story, their mind is synchronizing with the person who's telling the story. So we're very much empathizing and feeling influenced, if you like, by the storytelling that's happening. But also for the storyteller, it's been shown to have positive benefits for them as well. And that includes increased confidence and better performance. So storytelling works in many wonderful ways. And that's just one thing, okay? So it's really important as you move through the workplace and you're trying to build that authority without having, build that influence without having authority. We've talked about how you need to build credibility. We've talked about how the power of storytelling can influence people. But as you'll recognize, in today's world, we're looking at organizations that have more and more diverse teams. And this is really important because we can't really just ignore culture. It's something that's around us. It's something that's happening all the time. And we're becoming more and more diverse as organizations, as nations. And it's highly likely that you're already experiencing diverse teams, but it's extremely likely that you'll be working in an organization where there is a diverse team. So when we think about culture, we might start to think, first of all, about national cultures and the differences between them. And lots of people do this, and that's understandable. But, culture is so much more complex than that. It's very much about dimensions that we don't first of all consider. So I want to just get you to think about 3 different factors. Okay, so we've got 3 dimensions here. We've got the inner dimensions, which are fixed generally. They can change, but it's limited. The amount of change is limited. So thinking about things like our age, our gender, our race and ethnicity, our national origins, those things, I mean, age changes, but it's fairly, it's a fairly fixed identity. Then we've got the outer dimensions where we look at things like religion and education and our socioeconomic status, for example, our political views. All of these things are subject to much more change over time. And these definitely influence the way that we're experiencing the world. And then thinking about the organisational factors and the organisational dimension, where we're looking at different sectors, looking at different, whether we're working in a corporate environment, different professional environments, what site are we working on? So within the same organisation, are we working at a different site? There'll be a different culture within that. Different teams have different cultures and different departments, but also thinking about the position that you hold within the organisation. All of these things have an impact on the way that we interact with each other, and these are all cultural differences. That's the complexity of it. And imagine for yourself your culture, your cultural identities, if you like, because not one of us has one cultural identity. We're all made up of many. One of the things some of the things that we need to do when we're thinking about culture is to really get an understanding of ourselves. So I'm just going to give you some, again, this is a huge topic and we could talk about this for weeks and weeks and weeks and years, but just some key ideas here that you can take away and start to think about. When you're thinking about culture, the very first thing that I encourage people to do is to really get to know themselves and what their cultural identities are. So having that self-awareness, knowing your own culture across different dimensions. Okay. And then we need to think about biases. So it's very easy when we think about culture to start recognizing some of the stereotypes and generalizations that we've been exposed to in the media, in our lives, in our lives as we've grown up, and these have sometimes formed the values and beliefs that we hold as well. So we need to recognize biases and we need to check them. Now, they won't go away, we'll always have them, but what we can do is become more aware of them and take steps to mitigate the impact of them on others. The third thing that I want to just talk about is language. Now, there are a few dimensions of language to talk about here, because language, we could talk about languages, so different languages of different nations, first of all, and we need to be mindful of how we use that. So, as you might know, English is the language for business in lots of parts of the world. It's very much a global language that's used. And that means that sometimes you've got people who are working in a team whose first language is not English, but they're having to use it in order to do their job. And that can put people at a disadvantage. So one of the things that we need to be mindful of is, how are we using language in that context where it's very diverse? We've got people from lots of different places, lots of geographies, and using a language that is understandable and accessible to everybody, without being patronizing or condescending, obviously. But the other thing I think to think about, so we've got language in terms of nations, but also language from the perspective of, how are we using it? What is the impact of our language? So we need to think about how other people are going to receive what we're saying. So thinking about intent versus impact. Now, when we're speaking in the workplace, we need to be mindful that we cannot be discriminating against people. The Equality Act 2010 states protected characteristics that we need to be taken into consideration. And there's language that's changing and evolving, and things that we need to be mindful of when we're using language in the workplace, to make sure that we're not discriminating against, making people feel uncomfortable with that language. And you can look up, there's lots of information out there, particularly if you look at the government website, you can find resources that will help you to get an understanding of what's okay, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. Sometimes we cross the line unintentionally, but it can cause quite a lot of damage. So just making sure that your language is inclusive and not exclusive. And the fourth thing then is to think about flexibility. So, excuse me, when we're thinking about all the different cultures that we come into contact with, we need to be able to flex our style. We need to be able to flex our communication style. We need to be able to flex our working styles. We need to think about how other people perceive time and space, and how other people think about hierarchy within the organization, how other people communicate. So the more that we know about other people, the more that we understand the differences, and the more that we can accommodate and flex, so that we can be as inclusive as possible. Excuse me. And then the fifth thing, and this is a really important one, is to have courage. So when we talk about culture, and we talk about diversity, it's a subject that people can back away from, because they don't always know what to say. They don't know the right thing to say. They don't know the right thing to do. They don't want to do with more damage or any damage. And so sometimes we just don't have the conversations, but without having the conversations, it's very difficult for us to move forward. So we really need to have those conversations and get a little bit comfortable with being uncomfortable. People are mostly open to sharing information, talking to you about their experiences, talking to you about their culture, if they can see that the intent is clearly to be more inclusive and to work towards creating that inclusive culture. But I would just say as well that, and this takes us into the learning piece, that it's not the job of anybody else to inform you about cultural differences or diversity, etc. We need to be making a move towards taking responsibility and being accountable for our own learning, taking ownership of that learning, so that people with lived experience are not having to be the educators as well as carry the burden of having that diversity that's sometimes a disadvantage for them. But definitely, find people who are open to conversation, looking to share. One great way that you could do that is to look into employee resource groups in your workplace. These are great places to learn about different cultures, but also you can be an ally in those spaces. The more that you learn, the more that you understand, the more that you're there, and you can speak up for others as well. Okay. So moving on then, one of the things that's really important to you as you become more influential is how are you going to progress in your career? And one of the ways that you can do that is to build sponsorship and allyship. So allyship is having somebody who has your back, and sponsorship is about who we can get to support us in our journey as we progress in our careers. Now, sponsorship and mentorship quite often get mixed up, or they're used synonymously, but there are differences. So I want to just give you an insight into the differences between mentoring and sponsorship. So you'll be familiar with mentoring as you're all members of the graduate mentoring community. Now, mentors are really useful and they're important because a good mentor will hear you, and they will be able to share advice and give you guidance that will help you to overcome any challenges that you're facing in a particular area related to your career. Okay, so it's usually quite tailored to you. And mentors usually have the knowledge and the experience that you want to develop, so it's quite specific. Whereas a sponsor doesn't necessarily have to be in the same field as you. They don't have to have the same knowledge and experience that you're looking for, and they're not necessarily somebody who's going to be providing advice and guidance. In fact, they're usually not. Okay, now a sponsor is somebody who champions you. So this person speaks on your behalf in rooms where decision making takes place that we don't yet have access to. And this can really propel your career forward. Mentors are great in helping you to develop the skills that you need and the knowledge that you need, but a sponsor is what is going to help you move your career forward. They're going to be the ones that help you progress. Now, mentors are people who you can find. So you go and find a mentor, you find somebody who's suitable. But a sponsor, the very nature of sponsorship is that they are using their social and political capital within an organization to help move you forward, to help progress and advance your career. So this is not something that we can usually just go up to somebody and say, hey, I really like a promotion and I'd like you to put in a good word for me. We might do if we've developed a relationship with that person, but generally sponsorship is gained and earned. And in order to get that, you need to make yourself visible to people. You need to be able to demonstrate that you have the skills, the knowledge, and the dedication that's going to justify them spending that capital that I spoke about. So when you're thinking about sponsors, we're not necessarily looking for people who are going to be friends. We're looking for allies. Okay, we're looking for people who are role models, and who are influential within an organization. Okay, now one of the things that you can do to build sponsorship and to gain sponsorship is to focus on your performance and loyalty, and that builds trust. Okay, so I'm not saying that you have to go out and find somebody who could be a potential sponsor who's influential and start just flattering them and complimenting them. That's not what it's about. It's about you demonstrating that you have a good work ethic, that you're committed, and that you have a shared vision, and that you can demonstrate some loyalty to the organization for a reasonable length of time. Those are the positive factors that are going to get the attention of a sponsor. Okay, so remember that sponsorship is earned, mentors are found, so sponsors find you. So what I want you to take away from this is, what is your impact in the organization? So when you move into a role, or if you're already in a role, you're thinking about how you can influence without authority. What impact are you having? So that goes back to, it speaks to what we were saying earlier about what makes you unique. What is your superpower? How are people able to see that? What are you doing to make yourself visible? How are you demonstrating that across the organization? And if you feel that that needs some work, then it's worth considering, how can you increase your impact and its reach? And that might be through increasing your exposure, so showcasing some of the great work that you do, being more visible, so thinking about where you're putting that, and then that's going to attract the right people to you, and hopefully some influential sponsors. Okay, so after all of that work that you will have done to get to this point, we need to think about resilience. Okay, because without resilience, there is a real risk of burnout. And I'm sure there'll be a few people in business who can tell you that that is not fun to experience. So we really need to be taking steps and being proactive rather than reactive when it comes to resilience building. So it's important at work because resilience is associated with greater job satisfaction. More people who have resilience are happier at work. They have greater organisational commitment, and there's higher employee engagement. And when we have high levels of resilience, people who have high levels of resilience, have a greater sense of self-esteem, and they feel like they are more in control of the events that are happening in their life. So they've got a greater sense of purpose, and overall it also builds stronger interpersonal relationships. So that's another good reason to think about what you can do to ensure that you have it. Now, a word that was invented by ex-footballer Ian Dowie is bounce back ability. Now, I love this word. It basically means the ability to recover from a setback, so being able to bounce back. Now, we've all experienced difficulty in our lives, whether it's not doing brilliantly in an exam, or you've been for an interview and you didn't get the job, or you've had multiple deadlines to meet if you are in a role, and you're also experiencing the need to be working consistently at an extremely fast pace, and that's increasing in this world that we're living in. Everything is very fast paced, and technology is helping us to move even faster. But if we're not careful, like I said, all of these, and we're not managing these things proactively, it can have an impact on our well-being and on our resilience. So it's really important that we recognize resilience is not about carrying on when things get tough. Okay, it's not about having, it is about having grit, but it's about being mindful of the amount of grit that you have. So if something's difficult and you keep going and you keep going and you keep going and you keep going, and you're not taking care of your well-being, it's not sensible, it's not helpful for you, and it's going to be really difficult to bounce back from that. Now, there's not just one single way of building resilience. I think it's important to recognize that we all have different ways of building it. What you need to understand is what works for you. Okay, and what you need to think about is, how are you making sure that you're being proactive rather than reactive? So I'm going to give you share some tips that you can think about that might help you to build some resilience for you. Now, not all of these will necessarily work for you, but some of them might, and you will have your own strategies as well, which I'm sure you can share with others if they've worked for you. So paying attention to your health. I can't stress this enough. Health has got to be our number one priority, because if we're not okay, nothing's okay. We can't do anything for others. People who are physically healthy, who have good physical health, are 3.5 times more likely to be resilient. So definitely a good reason to be making sure that we are in good health. And we also need to focus on our physical well-being. So thinking about things that affect that could be our sleep, our eating, the amount of exercise that we do. And again, people who get enough sleep are 4.2 times more resilient. So if you have a tendency to stay up late at night, sleep for 5 hours and then get up and do a 14-hour day, that's not great. That's definitely going to lead to burnout down the line. So it's really important to make sure that you're getting enough sleep, and also staying hydrated, something I think we can easily forget as we're traveling throughout our days. So keep that bottle of water handy. Practicing relaxation techniques. This is something that I do. I make this part of my daily practice. I have to make this part of my daily practice. My method is meditation. I take time out of my day each day to practice meditation. For some of you, that might be prayer. For some of you, it might just be taking yourself off and being in a quiet space for a few minutes by yourself. Whatever works for you, as I said. And then thinking about how we see things, a mindset, reframing things that we see as potential threats. How might we see these as opportunities and challenges instead? So when we reframe it, it changes the way that we feel about it, and it changes the way that we handle it. And managing mindset is also really important. So, we're thinking about, what are our beliefs? What are our attitudes? Do we have limiting beliefs that are holding us back? Think about the power of yet if we do have limiting beliefs. If you're telling yourself, I can't do this, this is not going to work out, I don't have enough experience, just add the word yet to that. I don't have enough experience yet, or I can't do this yet. And it leaves it open for the potential to improve, to get better. Staying connected, making sure that you have a really good social support network is super important when it comes to resilience. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a go-to network of people who, when the going gets tough, I'm going to them. And it's just people who are there to listen, there to offer advice, there just to talk things through. We all need somebody to talk to. A problem shared is a problem halved, isn't it? And the more people we're sharing it with, the more it's getting halved, so it's smaller and smaller. But it really does help us to manage stress as well. But also, sometimes when we speak to people, just having that different perspective helps us to see things in a different light, and we might see what was stressing us as an opportunity as well. So another good reason to make sure you've got a good support network around you. Practicing self-awareness, can't stress enough in terms of a leadership skill how important self-awareness is. Thinking about what kind of language you're using to speak to yourself, so that inner voice, knowing what triggers you, what causes you to feel stress, what causes you to react in certain ways in certain situations. All of that is going to help you to be more self-aware and build that resilience, so you've got a good bank of it to get you through. And if you do need to take some time out, you can build it up, and you've got that bounce back ability. And watching your stress levels. Now, stress is everywhere, and it's always been a feature of life. It's kept us alive. Some stress is good, but too much of it can lead to burnout. And again, that's not something that I want any of you to experience. If you can take some of these steps and really think about how you can look after yourself and your well-being to make sure that you've got the reserves and the resilience you need to keep going. Okay, so all of what we've talked about then, all of what I've talked about today really helps you to think about some of the ways that you can begin to have an influence without authority, without having that leadership position or title, but still being able to have an impact in the workplace, in the organization, and for the people that you're working with, but also for yourself. Okay, now I want you to just think about 3 things here. If you take away anything from today, from the things that we've talked about, the emphasis is really about trust, respect, and relationship building. That's first and foremost. People need to trust you. You have to have that credibility. You need to go about building some really strong relationships and maintaining those relationships. And again, thinking about what you can give as well as take from those relationships. It's all about giving first. And then how can you contribute to an inclusive workplace culture? So how are you able to effectively work across cultures and develop that intercultural competence? It's going to take time. It is a process. You will make mistakes. We all make mistakes. I still make mistakes every day. But as the poet Maya Angelou said, you know, do your best until you know better. And when you know better, do better. And then the final thing I want you to take away from today is to really focus on your personal impact. So going back to what makes you unique, how can you use that to help other people, and really using that to increase your exposure. So how you're getting access to different opportunities, different people who can be supportive, how you can increase your visibility by focusing on your personal impact, and how that could possibly then lead to you being able to gain and earn that sponsorship that you'll need to progress your career moving forward. So really think about how you can be intentional, how you can stay relevant, and most importantly, be consistent. Thank you very much for listening. I'm open to taking any questions that you might have as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tanya. And on behalf of all our mentees who come along today, we'd love to use this opportunity now to maybe ask any questions from your very insightful presentation. I mean, it's still a very big transition into the workplace for a lot of students and graduates, and having this mindset, I hope, will give our attendees some confidence to take that first step. And navigate the world of work, because it is very challenging, confusing, disorientating, and being able to understand the workplace and how you can prepare yourself will help you get along. I particularly like the bit about mentoring versus sponsors. Within an organization, sometimes you'll have a mentor or a buddy, but having a sponsor, someone to cover your back, can make a huge difference. So, always seek out allies or colleagues that can really take you under their wing and share their experience. And a lot of very senior members within a company do want to put back, and they're very keen to see new talent reach their full ambition and career potential. So there will be individuals within the workplace that can help you succeed. Some brilliant information that you've shared there, and touching on a variety of different things that should give mentees a holistic approach to improve their mindset. So I hope everyone's been taking lots of notes. If you do want to listen back and have another look at the slides, it has been recorded, and we'll upload this to our YouTube channel very, very soon. Tanya is also one of our mentors, so you can search on the platform and have a session over Teams on a specific subject if you so wish. And also we have lots of other mentors with different experience that can help you make those steps into the workplace. We have got some feedback there. People have enjoyed today. They've got to shoot. We are quickly running out of time. So unless anyone has any other questions, I'd just like to thank you once again, and
you're welcome.
Thank you for supporting the programme.
You're very welcome, Dan. Thank you for having me. And as you say, if anybody would like to reach out, if you have any questions that pop into your mind later, I know we're running a bit short on time, please feel free to reach out to me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn as well, or as Dan said, if you want to reach out for a mentoring session, please do.
Lovely. Okay, I will stop the recording now and let everyone crack on. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much. Do you want to